I'd love your opinion as psychologists as to like how to kind of interpret some of the good. I know there's some bad and some wacky, but some of the good that came out of the charismatic renewal. Like, because this feels like some of the stuff we're circling around, right? Where it's like, get the intellect out of the way and just react. Yeah. Now, I'm not saying that's always a good thing, but I don't know. If you look at it from a strictly human point of view, it's probably a good thing sometimes to just, like we've already said, to kind of feel things and not be super analytical over everything. Yeah. What's your opinions on that?
I have all sorts of thoughts.
I think, so going back to your point, and I think it connects, is that like everything in us is made to be relational. That we often think, oh, this is like the me part, and like, oh, I've got to figure this out. But that actually the way the Father wants to relate to us is like everything is relational. The faster we can make it relational, the better with God. Is like, I'm anxious about this. I'm scared about this. I'm angry at you. And that like, because it's in the relationship with the Father that we're made whole. It's like we don't make ourselves whole and like fix ourselves, and then like we want to fix ourselves up like with the fig leaves and then present ourselves to God. But that the faster we can make it relational, like that's what confession is. Like, I sinned, make that relational. I'm going to tell you about it and ask your forgiveness. And so I think when we're getting the intellect out of the way, like the intellect is a tool that's made to serve. It's made to serve love. It's made to serve God. And that like our hearts actually are drawn like just on their own, like God draws our hearts. And so there's something really beautiful about just like letting that be raw and childlike and being like, like I want this person to be healed. Like I'm going to go pray for it. Like make that relational. And that the more often we can do that and get in the habit of doing that, like that's a beautiful way of relating to ourselves and letting ourselves relate to the Father. But then the Father always responds. He's always relational to us. And so that's where we can like also begin to listen, and like he can correct us. Like one of the philosophies I've had for discernment is like, I'm going to go in the direction I think is right and let God be all powerful. Like let him actually change my direction if he wants, make himself clear. That like, that's a way I can trust him is by saying like, hey, I don't actually have to sit here closed up and figure it out until I know, but I'm going to be like, like I want to do this, like, and move with that, but letting the Father be the Father and letting him be powerful and watching for where he's relational towards me, where he's speaking to me. And I think the more my heart speaks to the Father, the more I can actually hear him speaking in my heart, and that there's like a dialogue that goes on.
Yeah, I want to get your opinion, but a real quick take is to kind of make this analogy to marriage. And maybe it's like if my wife is trying to express something to me that's difficult for her to express, and I can tell she's overthinking how to articulate it, and I'm like, please just say it. Just, and so what we're not saying it's good to be irrational, but what we're saying is there's this kind of analytical defensive part of us that we just need to put aside. And I think that's kind of sometimes what you see in these beautiful charismatic settings with people who are kind of pray more expressively. But
yeah, and I mean that. I think what the charismatic movement has got right is they've brought back the deeply relational dimension, and there can be an authenticity to that when you feel. I want a genuine relationship, which means that sometimes I get really in my head about what are you going to think about this, and how is your response going to then dictate how I should. And there's something beautiful in the charismatic movement about when I feel moved by love. It's like, I mean, another analogy to marriage or like real life examples with marriage is if I feel moved by love for my wife, sometimes I want to run up and throw my arms around her. I want to swing around in the kitchen, or I want to like, there's a movement or an impulse that I want to, or I'll just start singing to her, or there's some, right? But then I can become self-conscious.
Yeah.
And I might hold that back, and then I'm not allowing the love that I have to sort of find free expression. Now, I think there's reasonable debates to have about whether or not charismatic elements should be in the liturgy or whether, but as a sort of movement of prayer, I think in some ways we've sort of artificially fragmented. I think the great saints, many of them, not all of them, but many of them, and maybe I want to say all of them.
It's a bogged down word, isn't it? Like just like a traditional Catholic today wouldn't appreciate Aquinas being called a trad.
Right.
You know? Because it's like, no, he's a Catholic who is traditional.
He's charismatic in the if charismatic means like
has that
you allow the Holy Spirit to move you in love toward the Father, then he's charismatic, right? But we've like done trad, charismatic. We have these like really distinct terms, and I think a holy person is actually...
They're kind of reacting against each other, aren't they? It's like the more trad you get, the more charismatic I get, and the more weird that looks, the tradier I'm going to get.
Right. But you don't want to like rip the heart out. You shouldn't rip the heart out of traditionalism, and we shouldn't rip structure and beauty
Breuninger.
Out of...
That's nice. You
charismatic.
Let's say I can say it better than that. We don't want to rip the...
I give him a softball.
We don't want to rip... Thank you. We don't want to rip the heart out of traditionalism or the brain out of the
charismatic movement. Exactly.
Yeah. That's really good. Yeah. Hey, thank you so much for watching. Before you go, do us a favor, leave a comment, let us know what you thought of the video, like, and subscribe.